The ink was barely dry on the divorce papers when Sylvana Smith let out a laugh that echoed through the silent courtroom. He didn't just smile. He smirked, a cold, predatory expression directed at the woman he had spent 10 years systematically destroying. He had the company, the mansion, and the millions. Hera sat across from him, head bowed, seemingly defeated. She was walking away with nothing, or so he thought. But as Sylvana reached for his mistress's hand under the table, Judge Holloway cleared his throat. He wasn't reaching for a gavel. He was reaching for a thick, dust-covered envelope that had been sealed for exactly 1 decade. "Mr. Smith," the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, "before you celebrate, we must address the document your late father-in-law left for this exact moment." The fluorescent lights of the family court in downtown Seattle hummed with a low, irritating buzz that seemed to drill directly into Hera Jenkins's temples. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her thumbs tracing the rough skin around her cuticles. She wasn't wearing her wedding ring. That had been pawned 3 months ago just to pay the retainer for her lawyer, a timid man named Mr. Abernathy, who looked like he wanted to be anywhere else but here. Across the mahogany table sat Sylvana Smith. He looked like a man who had just purchased the world at a discount. His suit was a bespoke Italian cut, charcoal grey, worth more than Hera's current car. His hair was gelled back in that aggressive, slick style he had adopted ever since he took over as CEO of Jenkins Logistics, her father's company. Next to him sat Isabella Ricci. Technically, she was his chief of staff. In reality, everyone in the room, including the stenographer, knew she was the reason they were here. She wore a white pencil skirt suit that was just a little too tight for a legal proceeding, and her lips were painted a triumphant shade of crimson. "If we are all in agreement," Sylvana's lawyer, a shark named Silas Thorne, said smoothly, sliding the final decree across the table. "Mrs. Smith, excuse me, Ms. Jenkins, just needs to sign here, and initial the bottom of page 42. Sylvana leaned back in his leather chair, clasping his hands behind his head. The smirk on his face was visceral. It wasn't just happiness. It was the satisfaction of a hunter standing over a trapped animal. "Go on, Hera," Sylvana said, his voice dripping with faux sympathy. "It's for the best. You were never built for the pressure of the business anyway. You'll be happier in that little apartment. Less stress." Isabella covered a giggle with a cough, flipping through a file on her iPad. They weren't even hiding it anymore. Hera looked up. Her eyes were tired, dark circles bruising the skin beneath them, but her gaze was steady. For 10 years, she had been the dutiful wife, the invisible support system. When her father, Arthur Jenkins, died of a sudden heart attack, Sylvana had stepped in as the savior. He had comforted her, handled the funeral, and then, slowly, handled everything else. "You're grieving, sweetheart," he had said back then. "Let me sign the checks. Let me talk to the board. You just rest." She had rested, and while she slept, he had stolen her life. "Mr. Abernathy," Hera whispered to her lawyer. "Is this it?" Abernathy adjusted his glasses nervously. "It's the best we can do, Hera. The prenup you signed 5 years into the marriage. It was ironclad. You waived your rights to the company stock in exchange for the beach house, which, well, as we know, has been leveraged to cover Sylvana's business debts. If you don't sign this, he drags the litigation out for years. You'll be bankrupt in a month." Hera picked up the heavy fountain pen. It felt cold. "Don't worry about the staff at the house," Sylvana added, twisting the knife. "Isabella is thinking of bringing in her own team, a fresh start for the estate." Hera's hand trembled slightly, but she touched the pen to the paper. "Scratch, scratch." She signed her name, Hera Marie Jenkins. The silence in the room was heavy. Silvana exhaled, a long, loud sound of victory. He slapped the table with his palm. "Done!" Silvana announced, standing up and buttoning his jacket. "Finally. Silas, send the courier to the bank. I want the transfer of the Jenkins Trust finalized by close of business today. I have a board meeting tomorrow, and I want to walk in there owning 100% of the voting shares." "Of course, Mr. Smith," Silas said, gathering the papers quickly. "And Hera," Silvana said, looking down at her. "I'm not a monster. I'll have my driver drop you off at your new place. On the house." Isabella smirked. "That's very generous of you, Silvana." Hera didn't move. She didn't stand. She just watched the judge. Judge Frederick Halloway had been silent for the entire proceeding. He was a man of nearly 70, with eyebrows like white brushes and a face carved from granite. He had been Arthur Jenkins's best friend. He had been at Hera's wedding. He had been at her father's funeral. For the last hour, he had watched Silvana gloat. He had watched Isabella preen. He had watched Hera surrender. "Sit down, Mr. Smith," Judge Halloway said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried a weight that instantly froze the room. Silvana paused, halfway to the door. "Excuse me, Your Honor?" "The papers are signed. We're done here." "I said," Halloway repeated, slowly removing his reading glasses. "Sit down." Silvana exchanged a confused look with Silas. Silas shrugged but motioned for his client to comply. Silvana sank back into his chair, looking annoyed. "I have a reservation at Le Monde in 30 minutes, Your Honor. Can we speed this up?" "You might want to cancel that reservation," Halloway said. He reached under his bench and pulled out a wooden box. It wasn't a standard legal file. It was an old, polished mahogany box with a brass lock. Hera's breath hitched. She recognized that box. It used to sit on her father's desk. "The divorce decree is signed," Judge Halloway acknowledged, "which means the marriage between Silvana Smith and Hera Jenkins is legally dissolved. You are now strangers in the eyes of the law." "Exactly," Silvana said. "So I get the assets. She gets the exit." "Not quite," Halloway said. He produced a small silver key from his robe pocket. "You see, Mr. Smith, when Arthur Jenkins passed away, his will was executed. You received the CEO position. You received the stewardship of the estate. But there was a codicil, a hidden addendum." "I saw the will," Silas barked. "I vetted it myself." "You saw the public will," Halloway corrected. "This is the private trust codicil. It was drafted by Arthur 3 days before he died. It had a singular triggering event." The judge unlocked the box. The click sounded like a gunshot in the quiet room. "The box could only be opened," Halloway said, lifting the heavy lid, "on the day Hera Jenkins became legally divorced." Silvana's smirk faltered. For the first time, a flicker of genuine fear crossed his eyes. He looked at Hera. Hera wasn't looking at the floor anymore. She was looking at him. And for the first time in 10 years, she didn't look weak. She looked like her father. To understand the terror that was beginning to creep up Silvana Smith's spine, one had to understand the magnitude of his theft. 10 years ago, Silvana had been nothing more than a mid-level manager at a rival logistics firm. He was handsome, charming, and utterly ruthless, but he lacked capital. He met Hera at a charity gala. She was 22, fresh out of art school, and completely uninterested in the cutthroat world of corporate shipping. She was gentle. She painted watercolors. She volunteered at animal shelters. Silvana saw her not as a person, but as a key to the Jenkins empire. He courted her with the intensity of a military campaign, flowers every day, surprise trips to Paris. He listened to her talk about her art for hours, feigning interest, while secretly memorizing the names of her father's board members. When Arthur Jenkins died, Silvana made his move. He proposed at the funeral reception, quietly, respectfully, offering himself as a pillar of strength. Hera, blinded by grief, clung to him. The takeover began 2 months into the marriage. Flashback, 6 years ago, the Jenkins estate study. "I don't understand these papers, Silvana," Hera had said, holding a stack of legal documents. "Why do I need to sign over the voting rights? Daddy said I should always keep 51%. Silvana had sighed, rubbing his temples, acting as if her questions were physically painful to him. "Hera, honey, listen to me. The market is crashing. The board is trying to oust the family. They don't respect you. They think you're just a painter. If you keep the voting rights, they'll manipulate you. If you sign them to me, I can fight them. I can save your father's legacy. But permanently? Do you trust me?" Silvana had asked, stepping closer, gripping her shoulders. His eyes were intense, blue and pleading. "I'm doing this for us, for our future children. I am taking the bullet so you don't have to." She had trusted him. She signed. The moment the ink was dry, Silvana changed. The flowers stopped. The trips stopped. He started coming home late, smelling of expensive perfume and scotch. When she asked about his day, he told her she wouldn't understand. When she asked why she was no longer invited to company galas, he told her she embarrassed him with her lack of business knowledge. He isolated her. He fired the old staff, the maid who had raised her, the gardener she loved, and replaced them with cold, silent employees who reported only to him. Then came Isabella. Isabella Ricci was 24, hungry and morally bankrupt. Silvana moved her into the office next to his. Then he moved her into the guest house for a project. Then he stopped pretending to sleep in the master bedroom. For the last 2 years, Silvana had been trying to force Hera to divorce him. But he needed her to file, and he needed her to accept the prenup terms. He made her life a living hell. He cut off her credit cards. He mocked her art. He turned their friends against her, spinning stories about her mental instability and substance abuse. He wanted her to break. He wanted her to run. And finally, she had. Or so he believed. Back in the courtroom, Silvana shifted in his chair. He looked at the old mahogany box. "This is ridiculous," Silvana scoffed, though his voice lacked its usual power. "A hidden will? That's fairy tale nonsense. Arthur Jenkins was a businessman, not a pirate. Whatever is in there is legally void. The statute of limitations on contesting the estate has passed." "It is not a contest to the estate," Judge Holloway said calmly, pulling out a thick document bound in blue ribbon. "It is a conditional transfer of assets held in a blind trust, a trust that I have administered for 10 years. "What does it say?" Isabella asked, her voice sharp. She sensed the money was threatened. "It is a letter," Holloway said. "Addressed to Hera." He handed the parchment to Hera. Hera took it. Her hands were steady now. She recognized the handwriting immediately. It was jagged, rushed. Her father had written this in the hospital, perhaps hours before he died. "Read it aloud, Hera," the judge said softly. "I think Mr. Smith needs to hear this." Hera cleared her throat. Her voice was quiet at first, then gained strength. "My dearest Hera, if you are reading this, 2 things have happened. First, I am gone. Second, you have divorced Silvana Smith. I know you loved him. I know you thought he was your Prince Charming. But I am a businessman, Hera. I recognize a shark when I see one. I saw how he looked at the company, not at you. I saw how he researched my financials before he ever asked for your number. I wanted to forbid the marriage, but I knew you would hate me for it. You have to make your own mistakes. But it is a father's job to ensure those mistakes don't destroy you. I knew that if he was genuine, you would never see this letter. You would stay married, have a happy life, and the trust would dissolve upon your 50th birthday, splitting the assets between you. However, if you are reading this, it means the marriage failed. And if the marriage failed, I am willing to bet my soul that it was because he took everything he could and then discarded you. Hera paused. Tears welled in her eyes, but they didn't fall. Silvana was pale. This is emotional manipulation. It's irrelevant. Keep reading, Holloway commanded. I structured the company ownership carefully, Hera. Silvana thinks he owns Jenkins Logistics because you signed over your voting rights. But he didn't read the corporate bylaws of the holding company, Jenkins Alpha. The bylaws state that any transfer of voting rights to a spouse is temporary and revocable upon the dissolution of the marriage. Silvana froze. That's a lie. My lawyers scoured those bylaws. You scoured the bylaws of Jenkins Logistics LLC, Holloway interjected smoothly. Jenkins Alpha is the parent shell company registered in the Cayman Islands. You never looked that high up, Silvana. You were too busy counting the cash in the operating accounts. Hera continued reading. Furthermore, the beach house, the city mansion, and the vintage car collection were not purchased by Silvana. They were purchased by the trust, with him merely listed as the caretaker. Since you are now divorced, the condition of the trust is triggered. All assets, including 100% of the voting stock of Jenkins Logistics, the real estate, and the liquid capital, revert immediately and irrevocably to the sole beneficiary, Hera Marie Jenkins. The room went dead silent. Silas, Silvana's lawyer, was the first to react. He snatched the document from the table, scanning it frantically. His eyes widened. He flipped a page, then another. He dropped the papers as if they were burning him. It's valid, Silas whispered, horror dawning on his face. It's a springing interest trust. It lies dormant until a specific trigger event, the divorce decree. Silvana, you don't own the company. You never did. You were just managing it for her. That's impossible, Silvana roared, jumping to his feet. He slammed his fists on the table, veins bulging in his neck. I built that company. I doubled the stock price. I did all the work while she painted flowers. You can't take it from me. I didn't take it, Silvana, Hera said. Her voice was clear, cutting through his rage like a blade. You gave it back when you signed those divorce papers 5 minutes ago. You signed away your right to be the caretaker. I will sue, Silvana screamed, pointing a finger at the judge. I will bury you in litigation. I have millions offshore. Judge Holloway smiled. It was a cold, wintry smile. About those offshore accounts, Mr. Smith, that brings us to the second part of the codicil, the bad faith clause. Silvana went rigid. Arthur Jenkins was paranoid, Holloway explained, leaning forward. He assumed that if you divorced Hera, you might try to steal from the company on your way out. So, he installed a forensic accounting algorithm in the Jenkins Alpha servers. It's been running in the background for 10 years. Every time you siphoned money into your personal accounts, including the account you used to pay for Ms. Ricci's apartment and the account in the Isle of Man, the trust flagged it. Isabella gasped and physically recoiled from Silvana, as if he were contagious. The trust defines that siphoning as embezzlement, Holloway continued. And under the terms of the will, if embezzlement is detected, the trust is authorized to freeze all assets associated with the perpetrator to recover the stolen funds. Holloway picked up a piece of paper that had just printed from the small machine on his desk. My clerk just confirmed it, the judge said, looking at the paper. As of 2 minutes ago, Your personal accounts have been frozen. Your credit cards have been suspended, and the company security has been notified to escort you off the premises if you attempt to enter the building. Silvana looked at his phone. He tapped the screen frantically. No. Service denied, Hera said softly. I imagine. Isabella stood up abruptly. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Isabella, Silvana pleaded, turning to her. Baby, it's a mistake. I'll fix it. I just need to call— Don't call me baby, Isabella snapped. Her voice lost all its sugary sweetness. It was hard, guttural. You told me you owned the company. You told me she was broke. You told me I was going to be the wife of a billionaire. I am, Silvana insisted. I am Silvana Smith. You're a manager who just got fired, Isabella spat. She grabbed her handbag. I'm not going down for embezzlement with you. I didn't sign anything. I was just an employee. She looked at Hera. For a second, there was fear in the mistress's eyes. I didn't know, Isabella lied, her voice shaking. Hera, I swear, he told me. Leave, Hera said. She didn't scream. She didn't throw water. She just gave a simple command. Isabella didn't wait to be told twice. She turned on her heel and practically ran out of the courtroom, the click-clack of her heels fading into the hallway. Silvana stood alone. His lawyer, Silas, was slowly packing his briefcase. Where are you going? Silvana demanded, grabbing Silas's arm. Silas pulled his arm away distastefully. My retainer is paid from your personal account, Silvana, the one that's frozen. And since you're now facing criminal charges for embezzlement, I can't represent you. Conflict of interest. I represent the company, remember? And the company now belongs to Ms. Jenkins. Silas nodded politely to Hera. Ms. Jenkins, I'll have the resignation papers for the board ready by morning. Thank you, Silas, Hera said. Now it was just Silvana, Hera, and the judge. Silvana slumped into his chair. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of a man who realizes he has walked off a cliff he didn't know was there. He looked up at Hera, his eyes wet. He was going to try the one thing he had left: manipulation. Hera, he whispered, his voice cracking. Hera, please. We were married. I loved you. I made mistakes, yes. But you can't do this. You can't leave me with nothing. I'll go to jail. Hera stood up. She smoothed the wrinkles in her simple dress. She walked around the table until she was standing right next to him. She looked down. You didn't leave me with nothing, Silvana, she said. You left me with my father's warning. And for 10 years, while you were buying cars and sleeping with your assistant, I was learning. Learning what? Silvana asked. Learning how you operate, she said. I didn't just paint, Silvana. I read every report you left on the desk at home. I listened to your phone calls. I knew about the accounts 3 years ago. Silvana's jaw dropped. You knew? Why didn't you stop me? Because, Hera smiled, and it was a smile that reached her eyes. I had to wait until you signed the divorce papers. I had to wait until you thought you had won. Because my father's will was clear, the trap only springs once the predator thinks the prey is dead. She reached into her purse and pulled out a single $20 bill. She placed it on the table in front of him. What is this? He asked. Cab fare, Hera said. Get out of my building. The rain in Seattle didn't just fall, it accused. It hammered against the yellow roof of the taxi that smelled of stale tobacco and pine air freshener. Silvana Smith sat in the back, clutching his briefcase against his chest like a shield. He hadn't spoken to the driver since he barked the address of the Jenkins Logistics Tower. He looked at his reflection in the window. He looked the same as he had this morning, same expensive suit, same haircut, but something fundamental had shifted. He felt transparent, ghostly. "It's a bluff," he muttered to himself, his thumb rubbing the screen of his dead phone. "Old man Holloway is senile. The police haven't frozen anything yet. I just need to get to my office, shred the Cayman files, and transfer the reserves to Bitcoin. Then I disappear." The taxi screeched to a halt in front of the 70-story glass monolith that dominated the skyline. This building was Silvana's temple. He had fired the original architects halfway through the lobby renovation because he wanted more marble, more intimidation. "That'll be 1850, the driver grunted. Silvana patted his pockets. He realized with a jolt of nausea that he had no cash. His cards were frozen. He looked down at the $20 bill Hera had slid across the table. It was crisp, humiliatingly new. He threw the bill at the driver. "Keep the change." Silvana stepped out into the rain. He didn't run. A Smith never ran. He walked with purpose toward the revolving doors, ignoring the water soaking into his Italian wool shoulders. He pushed through the doors into the lobby. It was cool, dry, and smelled of polished stone. He headed straight for the private elevator bank reserved for the C-suite. "Mr. Smith, sir." Silvana ignored the voice. He swiped his security badge against the sensor panel. Beep, beep, beep. A red light flashed. Access denied. Silvana frowned. He swiped again, harder. Beep, beep, beep. "This damn thing," he hissed, kicking the turnstile. "Hey, you, fix this." He turned to the security desk. Usually the guards were terrified of him. He had fired 3 of them last month for loitering, taking a lunch break. But today, the man behind the desk wasn't looking down. It was Frank. Frank was a 60-year-old retired Marine who had worked for Arthur Jenkins for 20 years. Silvana had demoted Frank to the night shift to get him out of the way. Frank was standing now, arms crossed, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. "The sensor isn't broken, Mr. Smith," Frank said, his voice booming in the cavernous lobby. "Open the gate, Frank," Silvana warned, his voice low, "or I'll have your pension stripped before lunch." "You don't have the authority to strip a wire, let alone a pension," Frank replied calmly. He picked up a clipboard. "I have a memo here from the new CEO. It lists a persona non grata." "Do you know what that means, Silvana?" Frank dropped the Mr. Smith. The disrespect hit Silvana like a slap. "I am the CEO," Silvana shouted. People in the lobby, couriers, receptionists, clients, stopped and turned. Silvana realized he was making a scene, but panic was clawing at his throat. "Call it! It's a glitch!" "It's not a glitch," a voice came from the main entrance behind him. Silvana turned. Silas Thorne, his former lawyer, walked in. But he wasn't alone. Flanking him were 2 men in dark windbreakers with clear lettering on the back. FBI. Behind them were 2 uniformed Seattle PD officers. "Silvana Smith?" one of the agents asked, stepping forward. "You can't do this here," Silvana stammered, backing up against the turnstile. "I own this building." "Silvana Smith," the agent repeated, pulling a pair of metal cuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for wire fraud, embezzlement, and money laundering. We have a warrant for your electronic devices and your person." "Silas!" Silvana screamed, looking at his lawyer. "Do something. Tell them." Silas adjusted his glasses, looking at Silvana with the clinical detachment of a mortician viewing a corpse. "I told them where to find you, Silvana. It was part of my plea deal to avoid being charged as an accessory. I gave them the encryption keys to your private server." The lobby went silent, save for the click of the handcuffs, ratcheting tight around Silvana's wrists. "Get your hands off me!" Silvana thrashed as they spun him around. "You don't know who I am. I'm Silvana Smith." "We know," Frank said from behind the desk. He pressed a button, and the large screen in the lobby, usually reserved for stock tickers, switched feeds. It was a live broadcast from the boardroom upstairs. On the massive screen in the lobby, Hera Jenkins walked into the boardroom. Sylvana stopped struggling. He watched, mesmerized by his own downfall broadcast in 4K resolution. Hera wasn't wearing the drab clothes she wore in divorce court. She had changed. She wore a sharp, navy blue power suit that had belonged to her mother. Her hair was pulled back. She walked to the head of the table, Sylvana's chair. The board of directors, a group of 12 sharks who had previously laughed at her, stood up. They didn't stand out of politeness. They stood out of fear. They had just received the forensic accounting reports. They knew Hera held the springing interest trust. She could fire them all with a snap of her fingers. Hera didn't sit immediately. She placed a thick black ledger on the table. "Gentlemen," Hera said. Her voice was amplified through the lobby speakers downstairs. "And ladies, you all know this book. This is the ledger Sylvana kept for off-book expenses. Bribes to customs officials, payoffs to inspectors, and of course, the funds he siphoned to his personal accounts." She looked around the room. "You all signed off on these audits," she said, "which makes you complicit." One of the board members, a heavy-set man named Gerald, wiped sweat from his forehead. "Hera, Mrs. Smith, we were misled. Sylvana told us, Ms. Jenkins," she corrected him sharply, "and save your excuses for the investigators. They are currently seizing the servers on the 40th floor." Down in the lobby, Sylvana watched as Hera took command. She wasn't the broken artist he had married. She was a titan. "However," Hera continued, her voice softening slightly, "I am not here to burn my father's company to the ground. I am here to purge the infection. If you wish to keep your seats, you will agree to the following terms immediately." "Anything," Gerald said. "First," Hera said, "we liquidate the offshore holdings and return the capital to the employee pension fund that Sylvana raided. Second, we rehire the support staff terminated in the last 3 years with back pay. Third, we erase the name Smith from every asset, building and truck in this fleet by tomorrow morning." She paused, looking directly into the camera, as if she knew Sylvana was watching downstairs. "This company was built on integrity," Hera said. "It survived the Great Recession. It survived the energetic crisis. It will survive my ex-husband." The board members nodded vigorously. In the lobby, the FBI agent nudged Sylvana. "Show's over. Let's go." As they marched Sylvana toward the exit, the revolving doors spun again. 2 women walked in. It was Mrs. Gable, the head of HR, whom Sylvana had fired for being too old. And beside her was the young intern, David, whom Sylvana had fired for spilling coffee. Mrs. Gable stopped. She looked at Sylvana in handcuffs. She looked at the wet shoulders of his suit, his messy hair, his terrified eyes. "Mrs. Gable," Sylvana gasped, "please tell them. I was under stress. You know Mrs. Gable didn't say a word. She just stepped aside to let the police drag him past. As he went through the doors into the pouring rain and the waiting squad car, he heard her say to the security guard, "Good to be back, Frank." "Good to have you back, Martha," Frank replied. The heavy glass doors swung shut, sealing Sylvana out of the world he thought he owned. 6 months later. The waiting room of the Seattle Federal Correctional Complex was a study in sensory deprivation. It was a concrete box painted a shade of beige that seemed designed to drain the hope out of a human soul. For Sylvana Smith, a man who had spent the last decade surrounded by Italian marble, velvet, and the scent of imported orchids, this room was a special kind of hell. He sat on a bolted-down metal stool that offered no comfort, his knees bouncing with a nervous, frantic energy. He looked at his reflection in the thick, scratched plexiglass that divided the room. The man staring back was a stranger. The bespoke suits were gone, replaced by a shapeless, bright orange jumpsuit that chafed against his skin. His hair, once a masterpiece of expensive styling and product, was now thinning, greasy and greying rapidly at the temples. He had lost 30 pounds. His cheekbones jutted out sharply, not in a handsome way, but in the gaunt, hollow way of a man who hadn't slept through the night in half a year. The noise was constant. Even here, in the visitation area, the distant clang of electronic gates, the shouting of guards, and the low, murmuring weeping of other visitors created a soundtrack of misery. Silvana checked the clock on the wall for the 10th time in a minute. She was 5 minutes late. "She's not coming," a voice in his head whispered. "She's playing you, just like she did in the courtroom." But she had to come. He had sent 17 letters, 17 desperate, pleading, ink-stained letters begging for just 10 minutes of her time. He had leveraged every ounce of his remaining dignity to get those letters mailed. He needed her. Not just for her money, though God knew he needed that to hire a lawyer who wasn't an overworked public defender, but because he needed to believe he still had some power over her. He needed to believe that the timid, quiet artist he had bullied for 10 years was still in there, waiting to be manipulated. The heavy steel door on the visitor's side buzzed loudly. The sound hit Silvana like a physical blow. The door swung open and Hera Jenkins walked in. The air in the room seemed to shift. In a place defined by greys and oranges, she was a splash of vibrant, elegant colour. She wore a tailored cream trench coat made of cashmere, a silk scarf with a subtle floral print wrapped around her neck, and leather gloves. She didn't look downtrodden. She didn't look like a divorcee picking up the pieces. She looked like a CEO. She looked like a queen visiting a dungeon. Silvana stood up, his chains rattling. "Hera," he breathed, his voice cracking. He pressed his palm against the glass. Hera didn't rush. She paused, speaking briefly to the guard, flashing a polite, confident smile that Silvana had never seen directed at him. She walked over to the stool opposite him, unbuttoned her coat with graceful, deliberate movements, and sat down. She picked up the black phone receiver. She waited. Silvana scrambled to grab his own receiver, his hands shaking so badly he almost dropped it. "Hera," he said again, the word tumbling out in a rush of desperation. Thank God you came. I thought you threw the letters away." "I read them, Silvana," Hera said. Her voice was crystal clear, devoid of the static that seemed to infect everything else in his life. It was calm, terrifyingly calm, all 17 of them. The grammar was slipping by the 4th one. "I can't think in here." Silvana leaned forward, his eyes wild. "You have no idea what it's like. The noise, the food. It's slop, Hera. They treat me like an animal. Me, Silvana Smith." "Inmate 9402, Hera corrected him gently. "That's who you are here." "Don't say that," he hissed, glancing nervously at the guard standing by the door. "Look, we don't have much time. The trial starts in 6 days. The federal prosecutors are out for blood. They're talking about RICO charges, Hera. They want to give me 20 years. 20 years. I'll be 65 when I get out. My life will be over." Hera looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You stole $40 million from the pension fund, Silvana. You laundered money through shell companies my father built. Did you expect a slap on the wrist?" "I can fix it," Silvana pleaded. "I have a plan. I always have a plan. But I need a real legal team. This public defender, he's an idiot. He wants me to plead guilty. If you could just authorize a loan, or maybe unfreeze the joint account just for the legal fees. I swear I'll pay you back. I'll sign over everything else." "You have nothing to sign over," Hera reminded him. "The trust took it all. The beach house, the cars, The stocks. You don't even own the cufflinks you were wearing when they arrested you." Silvana slammed his fist against the counter, causing the guard to take a step forward. Silvana flinched, holding up a hand in surrender, then turned his gaze back to Hera, softening his face into a mask of sorrow. He played his ace card. "Hera, please," he whispered, tears welling in his eyes. He forced them to fall. "Forget the money, forget the company. Look at me. We were married. We shared a bed. We had a life. I know I made mistakes. I know I hurt you. But I was lost. The pressure of the CEO job, it broke me. And Isabella, she took advantage of that. She preyed on me, Hera. She's a witch. She drugged me with her lies. I never stopped loving you. Not really." He watched her face, looking for the crack, looking for the soft-hearted girl who used to apologize when he spilled wine on the carpet. Hera tilted her head, studying him like a scientist observing a fascinatingly grotesque insect. "Isabella," Hera repeated the name slowly. "It's interesting you bring her up. Did you know she came to see me?" Silvana froze. "What?" "2 days after your arrest," Hera said. "She came to the manor. She was crying. She told me she was terrified of going to prison. She asked if I could put in a good word with the district attorney." "She's a liar," Silvana spat. "Don't listen to her." "I didn't have to listen to her," Hera continued, ignoring his outburst. "I just had to listen to the recordings she provided to the FBI. You see, Silvana, Isabella didn't just turn on you. She destroyed you. She was wearing a wire for the last 3 months of your affair." Silvana's jaw dropped. The blood drained from his face, leaving him looking like a corpse. A wire?" "She knew the ship was sinking," Hera explained. "She cut a deal for immunity. She gave them everything. The conversations where you told her how to forge my signature. The nights you bragged about bribing the port authority. And the worst part?" Hera leaned in closer to the glass, her eyes hardening into flint. "The conversations where you mocked me," she said softly. "Where you told her I was pathetic. Where you called me a useful idiot who would never figure it out. I heard it all, Silvana, in high definition." Silvana slumped back on the stool. The narrative he had built, the misunderstood husband, the victim of a seductress, collapsed in seconds. He was naked before her. I was drunk," he stammered. "I didn't mean it." "You meant every word," Hera said. "But that's not why I came today. I didn't come to talk about Isabella, or the money. I came to give you something." Silvana perked up. "Something? What? Evidence? Something that can clear me?" "No," Hera said. She reached into a coat pocket. For a second, Silvana hoped it was a check. Instead, she pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. It was old, the corners worn. Silvana recognized it immediately. It was his journal from 10 years ago, the one he kept during their engagement. "I found this taped to the underside of the bottom drawer in your old desk," Hera said. "You were very thorough with your digital security, Silvana. But you always had a weakness for writing down your thoughts. Vanity, I suppose." "Give that to me," Silvana demanded, though he had no way to take it. "I read the entry from October 14th, Hera said. She opened the book. "Goal number 1, marry the heiress. Goal number 2, isolate her from the board. Goal number 3, wait for the old man to die." She flipped a page. "But it was goal number 4 that really caught my eye," Hera said, her voice dropping to a whisper that was louder than a scream. "Goal number 4. If she resists, utilize Dr. Evans to declare her mentally incompetent. Committal to Swiss facility. Permanent power of attorney." The silence in the room was absolute. Even the weeping in the background seemed to fade. Silvana stared at the book. He couldn't deny it. He remembered writing it. He remembered the cold calculation of that night, drinking scotch and planning how to erase his wife's existence. "You weren't just going to steal my money, Silvana," Hera said, closing the book. "You were planning to steal my mind. You were going to lock me away in a sanitarium so you could play king without a distraction. You were going to bury me alive." "I never did it!" Silvana cried out, sweat pouring down his face. "It was just an idea. I never did it." "Only because I didn't fight back," Hera said. "Only because I played the role of the submissive wife perfectly. If I had stood up for myself back then, I would be in a padded room right now, wouldn't I?" Silvana didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth was hanging in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. "That is why I am not paying for your lawyer," Hera said, standing up. She buttoned her coat, smoothing the fabric. "That is why I am not dropping the civil suit. And that is why I will sleep very, very soundly tonight." "Hera, wait!" Silvana scrambled up, the phone cord stretching to its limit. "You can't leave me here. They're going to kill me. I'm soft, Hera. I'm not built for this. I'm Silvana Smith." "Silvana Smith doesn't exist anymore," Hera said, looking him up and down. "There is only inmate 9402. I suggest you start getting used to him." She hung up the phone. "Hera!" Silvana screamed, slamming the receiver against the glass. "Hera!" She didn't look back. Not once. She walked toward the heavy steel door, her heels clicking rhythmically on the concrete floor. The guard buzzed her out. The door opened, revealing a slice of the outside world. Sunlight, freedom, life. And then, with a heavy, final thud, the door slammed shut. Silvana stood alone in the beige box. He looked at the dead phone in his hand. He looked at the empty chair where his salvation had just been sitting. Slowly, his legs gave out, and he slid down the wall until he hit the cold, dirty floor. He curled his knees to his chest and buried his face in his hands, the orange fabric scratching his cheeks as the reality of the next 20 years finally, truly set in. The balcony of the Jenkins estate was no longer a place of quiet isolation. It was a sanctuary of rebirth. Perched high above the jagged cliffs of the Pacific Northwest, the air smelled of salt spray and blooming lavender. For the first time in 10 years, the heavy, oppressive silence of the house had been replaced by the sound of music. Specifically, a jazz record Hera's father had loved, playing softly from the open French doors. Hera Jenkins sat at a heavy mahogany easel, her fingers stained with cobalt blue and burnt sienna. She wasn't painting the stiff, technical landscapes Silvana had once forced her to produce for his business associates. She was painting a sunrise, a chaotic, violent, and beautiful explosion of light breaking through a dark storm. The morning sun hit the diamond on her right hand, a new ring she had bought for herself, not a symbol of a contract, but a gift of self-love. "Ms. Jenkins?" Hera didn't flinch at the voice. She didn't tuck her shoulders in or wait for a critique. She simply finished a long, sweeping stroke of gold across the canvas and turned with a smile. Standing in the doorway was Chloe, a sharp-eyed woman in her late 20s. Chloe wasn't the chief of staff Silvana had once employed to keep Hera in check. She was a brilliant logistics coordinator Hera had promoted from the warehouse floor. "The final audit for the quarter is in," Chloe said, holding a tablet but looking at the painting with genuine awe. "The transition to the Jenkins legacy branding is 100% complete. Every truck, every crate, and every digital asset has had the Smith name scrubbed. It cost a fortune in repainting fees, but the morale in the offices is at an all-time high." "And the stock?" Hera asked, wiping her hands on a rag. "Up 12%, Chloe grinned. "The market likes the new transparency. They like that the CEO actually visits the loading docks, and more importantly, the restitution to the pension fund is finished. The retirees got their checks yesterday. Hera felt a weight lift from her chest that she hadn't even realized she was still carrying. Her father's legacy was finally clean. The rot had been excised. "There's one more thing," Chloe said, her voice softening. "A call from Mr. Abernathy. He thought you should know the final sentencing was processed this morning for the remaining co-conspirators. Silvana's appeal was denied. He's been moved to the permanent facility in Walla Walla. He won't be eligible for a hearing until he's nearly 70. Hera looked out at the horizon. She thought of the man in the orange jumpsuit, the man who had tried to bury her alive in a golden cage. She waited to feel a spark of anger, a surge of triumph, or even a flicker of the old fear. But there was nothing. Just a vast, peaceful emptiness. He was no longer a monster in her closet. He was a ghost she had finally stopped believing in. "Thank you, Chloe," Hera said. "Tell the car to be ready in 20 minutes. I want to be at the children's hospital for the ribbon cutting of the new art wing." "Of course. Will you be wearing the Smith family pearls?" Hera looked at the velvet box on the side table. Inside lay the expensive jewelry Silvana had used to decorate her for his gala events. Pearls bought with stolen money, diamonds meant to act as a collar. "No," Hera said, her voice firm and bright. "Pack them up. Donate them to the domestic violence shelter's charity auction. I don't want anything in this house that was bought with a lie." As Chloe left to make the arrangements, Hera walked to the edge of the balcony. The wind caught her hair, whipping it across her face. She looked down at the rugged coastline below. For years, she had felt like the waves, constantly crashing against the rocks, being broken and reformed, pulled back into the depths by a tide she couldn't control. But today, she felt like the cliff. She picked up her brush one last time and signed the corner of the canvas. Not Hera Smith, not the widow, just Hera Marie Jenkins. She stood back and looked at the painting. The storm was in the background, dark and receding, and the sun was winning. It was the most beautiful thing she had ever created. "I'm ready," she whispered to the wind. She turned her back on the ocean and walked into her house, leaving the balcony doors wide open to let the fresh air finally, truly, clear the room. The story of Hera and Silvana is a powerful testament to the fact that silence is not the same as weakness. Silvana Smith spent a decade mistaking Hera's grace for fragility, never realizing that he was building his empire on a foundation of sand. When the judge read that hidden will, it wasn't just a legal victory. It was the ultimate correction of a cosmic imbalance. Justice might be slow, and it might be hidden in a dusty mahogany box, but it always finds its way to the light. Silvana ended up with exactly what he gave, nothing. And Hera? She ended up with the one thing money can't buy, her own life back. If you felt that chill down your spine when the judge opened the box, make sure to like this video and let us know your favorite justice served moment in the comments. Do you think 25 years was enough for Silvana, or should he have gotten more? We love hearing your theories. To make sure you never miss another dramatic real-life story like this one, hit that subscribe button and click the notification bell. We have new stories of betrayal and revenge coming your way every week. Thanks for watching, and remember, always read the fine print.